black square in the corner. We are recording. This is great. Woohoo! All right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to introduce this module called Mongoose. And we talked about it a little bit yesterday, but what Mongoose is going to do for us is it's going to allow us to not only talk to our MongoDB through our application, but also it's going to allow us to apply some structure to what we're doing with it. Because as you guys recall, MongoDB is quite unstructured, and we could basically throw any kind of object into it, and it's not going to gripe at us. Won't complain. But with our projects, we want to have some more structure. We don't want to just kind of throw things into our database willy-nilly. And it's going to allow us to apply some structure and also, if we need to, apply some validations to it. So what we're going to do today is going to be quite simple. We're just going to create a very simple application that has one page. And on that page, we're going to have a form where we can add a new dojo. All right, and then you guys have probably seen something like this in the other stacks. All we're going to do is on this one page, we'll also have a list of all the dojos that we have already added. And as I said, we'll be able to add a new one through the form. So pretty simple. We're not doing edit or delete any of that other stuff. We're just simply adding new ones, and that's it. All right, so I've got a folder open here. I've called it Mongoose. And actually, what is the first thing we want to do when we start a project of this sort or in this stack? We want to initialize a project. And I'll do -y, which is just going to accept the defaults on this. I'm going to make one small change in here, though. The name of the project is not going to be Mongoose because we would have some kind of a name collision here. If I then install the Mongoose package, but my package is called Mongoose, we'll probably see an error. In fact, let's just do that to show what that looks like. So if I go npm install Mongoose, yeah, I got this error. So we've got refusing to install package with the name Mongoose under a package also called Mongoose. Did you name your project the same as the dependency you're installing? So yeah, I did, because I accepted the defaults and I'm inside this folder called Mongoose. So let's just change the name of the project. We'll call it Mongoose Demo. We should be okay now. And let's think to ourselves, what are all the packages that we're probably going to need for this? Because that's when we first initialize our project, we also want to install our dependencies. So what do you guys think that we're going to need for it? We know we're going to need Mongoose because that's what we're introducing today. What else might we want to use?
Express.
Good.
Are we going to use views?
Yes, we are going to have a view that's going to render all the dojos
So
on it.
EJS.
So EJS. Good. Body parser. Yeah, I heard that somewhere over here.
Yep.
Yeah, why? Let's talk about real quick, why do we want to use body parser? What's that going to do for us?
It helps you read the form information that's submitted.
Correct. So when we submit a form with a new dojo, we need to be able to get that information on the server. And then, of course, we're going to put that in the database. So we've got our list of things that we want to install. I'm going to install them all at the same time. So the first one was Express. We also wanted EJS, and then we wanted body parser.
And then for this, you would --save, right? If you wanted to save them in your dependencies. But for the Mongoose one that we installed, we wouldn't want to save that, right? Because we don't want someone else, if they're gonna pull this up and like work with, or not work with it, but if they pull up the page, we don't want them to see that I'm sorry.
You know, I think the --save thing, that's actually an interesting question. I think that used to be necessary, but it doesn't matter anymore as long as you're on a recent version of NPM. So it used to be that if you installed without doing --save, what it would do is it would put that module and all of its dependencies inside your node modules folder, but it wouldn't include it in your package.json. Meaning that, if you were then to share the project with somebody else and your package.json didn't have that listed as a dependency, when they went to install the dependencies, they would be missing things. Now, though, you'll see that if we install it without the -- save, it still will show up in the dependencies. So I think if you were using an older version of NPM, you would have to do that. But we'll see here that once I install these things, they should be showing up in our list here.
Yesterday, I was having to use the -- save to put it in the JSON in the package.
Do you know which version of NPM you're using? Let me check mine real quick. I think this is at least somewhat recent. So if you go npm v -v, it should tell you. So I'm on 6.9.0.
I don't have the -- save. Mine show up in the dependencies.
Yeah.
I'm on a Mac too, though.
So,
I don't like that.
oh, well, Jesse, you're on. Yeah, you're on Mac too. So it's not a bad habit to get into, and it certainly won't hurt anything if you do the -- save.
Maybe it doesn't need it.
Yeah, check it out. So if things are already showing up in your list of dependencies here, then you should be good to go. No problems there. If they're not showing up there, then just add in that -- save. Okay. So now we've got everything we need. We've got these 4 dependencies, and what I want to do is create my my server file. So let's just call it server.js. All right. And generally, the first thing that we're going to do, or one of the first things that we're going to do, is we're going to bring in Express like this. And let's remind everyone, what is Express doing for us? Why are we using that? Oh.
It's the framework, right?
Yes, so this is our framework that's going to allow us to handle different routes. It's basically creating our server for us. Okay? Makes sense? All right, the other thing that we're going to want to bring in is this body parser module that we installed. So I'll do the same thing here. Body parser equals require body parser. Okay. And then down here, let's just let's create an app. So our app again is just going to be our server shell, the main part of the server. We'll just say const app equals invoking express, the top level function, so that'll give us an app. And then what do we need to do to actually make this app live in order to, yeah, we need to listen. Very good. So we'll say app.listen, and then we'll tell it what inside here? The port that we want to listen on. So 3000. And I can pass it a callback. So if I want to just log something in here, I can say, okay, whoops, it fixed the spelling, yeah. Listening on port 3000. Okay. So that's what we've got so far. We just have an app that's listening on port 3000. Will that be able to handle any routes for us, though? No, we haven't set any routes up yet. Right. Before we get to the routes, though, let's actually do something with this body parser. How are we going to use the body parser module here? Do you guys remember how this works? So app.use. Okay. Okay, and then body parser. What else do we need here? Well, we're not done with the body parser yet. Yeah, sorry. All that what?
Stuff that you can copy paste and stuff.
So
Yeah.
remember, body parser is the module itself, but it also has some different methods in it. So which method do you think that we're going to use of body parser in this case? We're just dealing with form data.
Request, right?
No. It's this method called URL encoded. And then you can pass some options to that. There's this one extended true. And probably that won't even be necessary for the things that we're doing, but you guys can kind of look into it later. I'm forgetting what it does off the top of my head, but it's not super important. Are there a couple what?
I think on the material, there's like 3 lines they tell you to put in. It's extended, true, and then there's like 2 other things. I don't know.
Really? Let's look. So on the Mongoose thing,
That could be for session.
yeah, it's just this, just extended true.
Okay, cool.
So.
Yeah, that was.
And we could probably get away without having this. I believe we could just invoke it, and I'll probably try doing that. We'll see if we run into any problems. So we're invoking this method called URL encoded, and that's going to be able to handle the form data for us. All right. So there's that. And then probably the first thing we'll do is to just get a basic route going so that we know that the whole thing's working. So we'll say app.get / and then we're going to have a callback that takes in a request and a response. And then inside here, let's just send back hello or something like that, just so that we know, okay, this app is working. So we'll say res.send hello. All right. Now what I want to do is I actually want to run this with NodeMon so that it's always refreshing our changes for us. And before I do that, though, we haven't yet done anything with Mongo. What do you think we need to do with Mongo so that we can successfully attach this? Yeah, well, there's the require, which we haven't done yet, but what did you say? Oh? Yeah, we actually need to run Mongo first, because if it's not running yet on our computer, then we won't be able to connect to it. So I'm just going to open another terminal here, and we'll say, actually, Mongo D. And if you don't, again, as we covered yesterday, if you don't own the /data/db directory, you're going to need to run that with sudo. Okay. So I'll just run MongoD, and that should bring it up. Okay, so you see it's waiting for connections on port 27017. All right, great. And then also probably what I'll do, just for the sake of this exercise, is I'm going to open up an actual Mongo shell, a Mongo terminal, where we'll be able to explore our data as we add new things to it. So I'll just go Mongo, which would give me a shell. And then again, as we were talking about yesterday, I can show my DBs here. I don't yet have one for this project, so when we start using Mongoose, it's going to create one for us the very first time we add something to a collection. All right. So let's go back here to our main terminal, and what we want to do is we want to run this with NodeMon. So I'll come in here, NodeMon. I'm going to add these arguments so that it will also check EJS files and then JS files, which we want it checking as well. And then the app crashed.
Is it important to get Mongo
Oh,
running?
sorry, I was running the wrong thing. Is it important to do what?
Is it important to get Mongo running before you use NodeMon?
In this case, it wouldn't necessarily have mattered because, as you can see, we haven't yet even required Mongoose. So yeah, we're not going to run into any errors. The error that we ran into is that I didn't actually specify what file I want to run. So if you don't do that, as you can see, it's automatically going to look for index.js, and in our case, we didn't have one.
Okay.
So that's why we ran into an error. So let's just do server.js.
Oh, you didn't do server.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so actually it is deprecated to not use the extended option. So I guess we'll meekly put it back in there. Okay, now we don't have any warnings, so that's kind of nice. All right, so we've got our app running, and we've got it running with NodeMon. So let's just go back and actually open up. There we go. So what I'm trying to show you guys is just sort of testing things as you go along, and that way we know at each step this app is still working. So if something breaks, hopefully you can identify, well, it was one of the last couple steps I made, rather than, oh geez, I don't know, it's 10 lines of code ago and I don't know what went wrong and where. All right, so what we were talking about doing is we're going to create on this page just a form where we can add some dojos, and then of course we're going to loop through the dojos that already exist. All right, so let's first create a little, we're going to create a folder for our views, which you guys have been doing. And then inside that view, I'm going to create, for now, just an index.html. I'll change this to an EJS file, but for whatever reason, my autocompletes don't work on EJS, so just going to go like this. Save it, and then we'll change the name to EJS. All right, and our app restarted, so that was kind of nice. So let's just put something in here. Welcome to Mongoose. And then inside our server, instead of sending this hello like we've been doing, let's start to use EJS in here. So when we do app.use, or underneath app.use, how are we going to take care of our view engine? Do you guys remember how that works? App.set. Okay. Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the dir name and then append to that views. Okay. And then what's the other thing that we need to set?
You gotta set your templating engine.
Correct. Very good. So what does that look like?
App.set.
View engine,
EJS.
EJS.
That'll do it.
Excellent. Okay, so now what do we need to change inside of our index route here? Because we want to send back the EJS template we have, as opposed to just this sending back hello.
Put index up there.
Okay, but is it still going to be res.send though?
Res.render.
Render. Very good. Okay. So let's change this. Okay. Excellent. So I'm pretty pumped about it too. It's working. So that's always a good thing. All right, so we're getting back our page. We haven't done anything with the database yet, so let's work on actually connecting that. Or actually, let's flesh out the page a little bit more. We'll just create the form that we're going to take in new dojos in. So we'll just come down here, create this form, and where do we want our action to be? I'm gonna say /dojos, because we're taking in new dojos at this. And then what is my method gonna be? Post. Very good.
Not there, it only matters.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. No, it shouldn't matter. But I've definitely seen it done with caps all over the place. So there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. Yeah. Okay. So inside of our form, we're just going to take in a couple things. What do you guys think we should have for our dojos? What name? Okay, so it'd be like location. Good. Anything else we might want to put in there? Language. Okay. So language would be an array, probably, or languages might be an array, probably a little more complicated than we want to get right now.
Date?
Maybe like one thing. How about the number of students that it can take? Does that sound pretty good? All right. So we'll do a little div here that will have the location part, and we'll do label, location, and then our input is going to be, we'll be explicit here, and we'll just say it's type of text, but if, as you guys know, if you don't specify this, it will be a type of text automatically. And we'll call this name equals location. All right. Then I want to do the same thing, so I'll just drop that down there. And this is going to be, we'll call it capacity. Oops. Capacity, name capacity, and we'll actually change this to a number type. Not really super important, but what the number type will allow us to do is we'll be able to sort of arrow up or arrow down. Kind of nice. And then underneath this, let's create, just drop in a button. Whoops, I still can't do my autocompletes. And then we'll say submit. All right.
So when you do that,
Input type button.
is well, it can't be type button. If it's
Or
the
input
button.
type submit.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Is submit automatically assumed if you don't specify for that?
Yes, and then so that's a good question. So if I did not want this to submit, what I could do is I could do type equals button, and that would tell it I don't want this thing to automatically submit a form that it's in.
But if you don't put anything, it just.
If we don't put anything in and it's a button inside of a form, it's going to attempt to submit that form.
It's like doing input type submit. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. So that's that, and then on the front end, we've just got this little form here. Nothing too fancy, nothing too exciting. Takes in a location and capacity, and you can see I've got my little arrows over here because it's a type number. Can you guys see that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So kind of nice. All right, so that's pretty much everything that we need in order to be able to take in the new dojos. The next thing that we want to do is actually connect up our database so that we can do that. So let's go back inside. I'll close out our package.json. We don't really need that anymore. Back inside our server.js, we need to hook up Mongoose. So let's bring it in up here. Mongoose. Okay. And what we want to do is we also want to, what else do you think we might need to do with Mongoose? So we actually required it, we brought it in, but what might have to happen in order for us to use it? That's a pretty good idea. Not quite right, but you're sort of on the right track. Mongoose needs to connect to our Mongo database, right? And there's actually a method in Mongoose that will allow us to connect. So that's what we need to do. We have to make sure that we invoke mongoose.connect in order to actually make that connection to the database. So up here, let's just say, that's a good idea, but we don't really need to. We just need to invoke the connect method, which will create the connection for us. So we're going to go mongoose.connect, and then I'm going to pass in a connection string. It should look something like this, MongoDB, and then you're telling it where that is. In this case, it's just our local host. It's on our computer. And then the next thing that we want to include is the name of the schema, or the name of the database that we want to connect to. So again, I haven't yet created one for this project, but by putting it in here, and then when we add things to it, it's going to be created for us automatically, which is kind of nice. So we'll just call this database Mongoose demo. Go. I'm going to open back up my terminal to see what happens, because now we're actually trying to connect. So if something goes wrong, it might crash the app, and I want to know about it. So nothing crashed, but we did get something down here. We've got a deprecation warning from Mongoose just telling us URL string parser is deprecated and will be removed in future version. To use the new parser, pass option this to Mongo client connect. So to get rid of that, there are two ways that we can get rid of that. We can either do mongoose.set, and then the key would be use new URL parser, and then I could say true to that. So notice how I set that option before we actually do the connect. And that gets rid of the warning. The other way that I can do it is by passing it into the connect method itself. So inside here, I can give it this options object, and I could say use new URL parser true. So in either case, we got rid of our deprecation warning. And well, because there's I guess there's an old URL parser that it would use for these connections, and they're gonna remove that in future versions. So they're just saying, if you want to use the new URL parser now, just pass that in as the option, and that would get rid of it. Okay.
So really quick, this mongoose.connect, and then you're putting in the URL of the DB that we're going to use.
Yeah.
So you said if it doesn't exist, this is going to create it for us, just like if it didn't exist when we were using the Mongo terminal, it would create it.
Yeah. So let's clarify that. It's not. It shouldn't create this database for us immediately. What it's going to do is it will only create that database for us as soon as we try to insert something into it. So we haven't done that yet. We just simply connected to it. So if I go back to my Mongo terminal here, we should see that this database still doesn't exist. Oh, I can't clear it. Okay, so let's just do show DBs again. Yeah, so it's not there yet because we haven't done anything to it.
But that's why we're
Right.
leaving Mongo open in that other terminal, because if that wasn't open, it wouldn't be able to access it like that. Or can it access the Mongo DB even if it's not open?
You're not asking about this terminal, you're talking about the other one, right? Okay, yeah. Number 2 we're leaving open because it needs to be open for connections in order for us to connect to it.
That's what I was asking.
Correct.
So, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So that's just going to sit there, though, while we're working.
Yeah, exactly. We're not really doing anything to it. We might notice that it says some things if something connected to it, like right here. Just we received client metadata from this connection, so you can see we did actually successfully connect to it. Name Node.js version 3.2.7. So yeah, it's just kind of like giving us a log of things that are going on in real time. So we got all that squared away. Before we go about actually inserting anything into the database, what we're going to want to do is establish some kind of a schema. So we already established which things we're going to take in through the form. So let's go down here. We're just going to create a new schema, and we'll call this Dojo schema. And then we're going to create a new instance of a Mongoose schema. All right. And so what this is going to take is essentially key value pairs of the attributes that you want to have in this particular schema. So the ones that we talked about were location and capacity. So let's come in here, and in our object we'll say location is the first thing that we're interested in. Now keep in mind the order doesn't matter because this is an object, so it doesn't really matter what, it's just maybe for your readability, whatever makes the most sense to you. So location is going to be of type string, and we're going to make this required true. What this is saying is that when we go about trying to insert something into our database using this schema, if we try to pass it in without a location, what do you think is going to happen?
Give us an error.
You're going to get an error. Exactly. Which is what we want. This is how we're going to go about imposing some structure on our MongoDB.
Yeah.
Okay.
Requiring a string per location.
Okay, now let's do the other thing here, which is capacity. And again, this time I want this to be a number, and I want that to be required as well. So we're pretty much done with the schema. There's one other thing that I'm going to add to this, which is in the past you guys have done created at and updated at, right, with SQL. We're going to do something here that does that for us automatically, which is quite nice. If we specify down here as a second argument of our Mongoose schema that we want timestamps, it will make them for us. So every time a new record is or a new document is created, it will set both created at and updated at to that point in time. And then same thing on an update. An update's just going to change our updated at. Yes.
Is there a way using a similar thing to make the object ID more readable?
You don't like those object IDs? What's your issue with the object IDs?
I mean, it's about 47 characters too long, but
Yeah, I suppose you could. There's probably a way to do auto incrementing, but we're not going to do that here. It doesn't really matter. The important thing is that the object IDs are unique. Because if they're not unique, then you're going to run into problems for obvious reasons. And because Mongo is doing that for us, it's creating these unique IDs. We don't necessarily want to mess with that logic. Right? It's already got our back, and it's going to create the unique IDs for us if we start trying to play with that. Now, again, you can create your own ID field on the objects, just like how we were playing around with yesterday. I can create an ID property with no underscore in front of it, if I so desire. Yes.
Specifying type number. Does that mean if we go to the the number of students allowed or to enter, what if we did something like 32.5 or something like that? Is that number gonna allow any valid number, or is it
it should. I don't think it would have any issues with decimals. I don't know if that's a valid type. That's a good question. So let's just check. Mongo valid types. Oh, so here we go. BSON types. 32-bit integer. Oops. Double. Okay. Object ID, Boolean, date. Yeah, so number. Yeah, so number just encompasses those different things. I don't know that we could necessarily restrict it. Now, obviously, in your there is a way that we can provide more validation on the back end if needed. Today, we're just going to keep it simple and just do number. But yeah, you'd be able to further validate that field if you want to, and we'll probably get into that later on. But let's go back to what we were doing here. So I've got these timestamps, and again, that's going to automatically update the created at and updated at for us, which is quite handy. And then the other thing that I need to do is I need to actually register this. We're going to create a dojo model using this dojo schema that we just created. So let's say mongoose dot models, and then we'll say the dojo model. Oops, why is that not? 1 second. Okay, yeah, it's mongoose.model. I had that wrong. So mongoose.model, we're going to specify the name of the model that we're creating. So this is going to be the dojo model. And then the schema is going to be the second argument that we're going to pass to it. I just created that, so we'll pass in the dojo schema. And notice that we have some other optional parameters here. So up here, you guys can see that we're getting some help here from VS Code. We can specify a collection that we want these to go into. By default, what it's going to do, because we called the model dojo, is it's going to put this in the dojo's collection, and it will lowercase the name of that and add an S to it. So that would be the default. If I wanted to change that, though, I could specify in there what collection I want the dojos to go into. Skip init, boolean. I think with that, I don't know for sure what that option is, but I believe that might be if we wanted to skip creating a collection if the collection didn't already exist. But obviously we do want that behavior. We just want the collection to be created if it's not already there.
So that's all we need for the model.
Yeah, so all we really need is the name of the model that we're creating, and then the schema that we want it to be based on. Then the other thing that I want to do is I want to grab a reference to that model so that inside our when we render this index page, we're going to want to show all the dojos that we have so far. So let's just get a reference to dojo, which is mongoose.model dojo. So mongoose.model is kind of an interesting method because you can set the model equal to this schema, and then you can also grab a reference to it at some point after. So now I want a reference to the dojo model because I want to be able to search and find all the dojos that I've added once we're rendering that page. Does that make sense? You guys remember from your other stacks how you would be using the model to grab or find instances of that model? That's essentially what we're doing. Okay. All right, so let's just come down here, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find all of the dojos that we have thus far. And obviously we don't have any, but let's just do this. Inside our callback where we're going to render this page, I want to find all the dojos. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to do dojo, which is the model that we just grabbed a reference to, and we're going to say find. Okay? And then the first thing that we could pass to the find is whether we want some query to be. So if I was only looking for dojos that were in Burbank or something like that, I could put inside here location Burbank. However, in this if I could spell. However, in this case, we want to find all dojos. So I'm just going to leave this as an empty object. And then the second thing that we need to provide is this callback function. As you can see, the callback is going to take an error, potentially. So if we run into some kind of error when we do this query, it'll give us back an error. Or it's going to give us the result. And you can see it's going to be an array of documents. Because that's what the find method does, is it's going to provide us with an array. So if we only found one document that meets our criteria, it'll just be an array that has one thing inside it. All right. So let's create this callback function again with error, and then we're going to say we'll just call these dojos because it's going to be should be an array of dojos. Okay. And then inside that callback function, where do you think I want to render my page? Do you think I want to render it where I am, or might I want to move that?
Wait, can you ask that again?
Where do I want to render my page? Do I want to keep this where it is, or do I need to move that somewhere?
Well, if you're asking, you should move it somewhere.
Smart.
Yeah, I like your thinking.
Your question answered the question, but where?
Yeah, where might we want to move that? Any guesses?
Still want.
You need another route for that?
No, still the same route, because I'm just getting my index page. That's all I'm doing. But what we're doing now is we're actually trying to get all of our dojos. But is this going to work as is? That's all I'm asking. I mean, so this will still render, right? But aren't I going to want to pass in the data
Oh,
to
yeah,
the
you gotta-
data?
If you don't move it
You
inside
gotta pass in that array.
Yeah, so I hear over here Jeff was saying I need to move it inside the function. Why do I have to do that?
Because if you don't, the dojo object or the dojo objects documents that you're looking for, it's gonna say they don't exist when
Right.
you try to render the page. I had that trouble yesterday.
Yeah, so what we learned about hoisting and scope and so forth before is that we don't, outside of here, so we're outside of this whole callback, we have no reference to dojos. And which actually makes sense on a lot of levels because we only get access to dojos once we've run this query. And this is what's called an asynchronous event, which means that as we go through this code, we have to wait to get the dojos back before we're going to do anything with it. We don't want to just render the page because we haven't yet, the query hasn't yet run, or it hasn't returned its results essentially.
What if you did res.render index, comma, and then pass that in? Pass dojos.
Well,
in?
what are we going to pass in? Do we have a reference to dojos right now?
Oh no.
No, we don't, right? The only place that it becomes available is inside this callback.
Okay. Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so inside the bigger function that we're inside of here, we only have a reference to the request and the response. That's it for right now. However, inside this callback that the find method gets, we will have access to both error and dojos.
Okay, what if you had, so you have a model of dojos.
Dojo model. Uh-huh.
Yeah. What if you had a user's model also, and you wanted to do a dot find and bring both of those arrays of all the users and all the dojos in? Where would you put the render?
You could well, there are a couple ways you could do it. You could nest callbacks, which is kind of nasty,
Yeah.
or potentially you could do a promise-based solution, which is something else entirely. But don't worry about that yet.
Okay.
You're kind of getting a little ahead, but I like that you're thinking about that.
Yeah, because I was thinking Python-wise, we would have we would be using users.allUsers or whatever, and then we'd also have whatever our other model was,
Yeah.
.all, so we could use both of them on our index.
Right.
HTML, but
Yeah, and we'll see later on that how we handle relationships and nesting might be a little bit different with Mongo.
Okay.
So I mean, to a degree, we can kind of force Mongo to behave a little bit more like a relational database, but at the end of the day, it's not that. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Was there a question over here? I thought I saw. No? Okay. So let's move this inside here and actually give it the data that we're getting back from our query. So I'll just pass it this object that has dojos in it. And before we even check the render on that, let's just console log out. We'll console log air and then dojos. Okay, so I'll go back to my terminal here. And then when I hit this route, I should actually get something back in my terminal telling me if there was an error and then also if we had any dojos. So let's do this. So I got null for my error, which is good, no errors. And I got an empty array for dojos. So there are no dojos currently in the table. Or, yeah, in the collection. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to kind of create the logic to actually iterate through some, never mind. We'll enter some in first so that we actually have something to iterate through on the front end. So where are we with this? We've got the form. The form's posting to a certain route. What do you think I need to add to be able to handle those form submissions? Good, very good. So I'm going to do an app.post. What was the route that we had that we were posting to? Dojos, correct. All right. And as always, we got a function that takes in a request and a response. All right. Now let's see what's coming into our request. So we'll just go. We're gonna console log rec.body, and body is the property that's gonna have all the form data that we're taking from this page. So before we do anything with it, I'm just gonna console log it and then redirect back to the same page. Okay, so when we submit the form, we're just gonna console log it and see and make sure it's coming in the way that we want, and then we're just gonna redirect right back to that same page. Okay, so I come here and let's put in Burbank. We'll say the capacity 80. Submit that guy. Let's see what we got here. Excellent. So we're getting the form data on the back end. That's what we want. And then the next thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to actually have to create this new dojo from the data that we got in. Right? So how do you think we might do that? We're going to use this dojo model. And then, so let's just get rid of this real quick. So the way that we can do it is we can do a dojo.create. Right? Yeah, starting to look familiar. Now, let's note real quick that object just had two things in it, and those are the exact two things that we wanted. We wanted the location and also the capacity. So let's try to just use that object as is. If you guys don't have any issues with that, let's just pass it in exactly the way that it is. So we'll pass in the entire rec.body. And then the next thing that we need to do is we have to give it a callback. Oops. Actually, we should be giving it a callback. Okay, so there could be an error just like in the other case, and we should also get a document back if something was successfully created. So we'll just say that the document was a dojo. That's what it should be if everything works. Okay. And then inside of our function body, what we're going to want to do is, at that point, we've already processed the request. We want to do the redirect there. Make sense? Okay. Yeah, so let's just do this. And then let's console log, again, like we were doing, console log the error and the dojo. Okay, now let's try to create that again. No, because the change that I made was actually on the back end.
Create it out of the,
Yeah. So if I had made some change on the front end, then of course I would need to refresh my front end. So here we've got null, so no errors, and we've got this new document. So this is quite nice. We've got our ID, we've got our location, our capacity, created and updated. Nice. We didn't have to do anything to get those 2 timestamps. Yes.
You create the dojo create the anonymous function. The dojo is just a parameter that you're naming there, lowercase d. That dojo is just whatever gets put in.
Yes, that's a great question. This you can call whatever you like. If you wanted to call it document or doc, whatever. Error could be called whatever you like too. If you wanted to call it E, you could do that. Doesn't matter. It's just that the order of the arguments is important. So the first thing that you're going to get back from the callback is the error. The second thing you're going to get back is the document that was created if you don't have an error. Okay? Make sense? All right. So we successfully created a dojo. That means that now on the front end we can actually display these things. So let's do that real quick so we can actually look at something. So up above this form, I'm just going to create an unordered list. Actually, we'll do a table just to be a little more fancy, is that what you said? Nice. Okay, so we'll have a T head here. And then inside here, we'll have a T row, TR. And then we'll have these T heads. So the first thing will just be the location. And then we've got our capacity as well. Oops. All right, close out my row. Jeez. Close out T head. All right, and then in the T body, I'm going to want to actually loop through things. So how do we open up a loop in EJS? Do you guys remember?
less than sign equals.
And then we'll do parent. So you use the equals sign when you're going to output something straight away. But right now what I want to do is loop through what I've got. So in here we'll say, I'm actually going to do something a little different than you guys are probably used to seeing. I'm going to do a for each loop. So remember, the dojos that I'm going to get in is just going to be an array of dojos. All right?
Otherwise, you could write for dojo and dojos.
Yeah, so we could do that too. We'll do it that way first. So we'll say for. Yeah, sure. Which ones do you guys have a preference? You want to see both? Both. All right. All right, so let's just start with the other way that you guys have probably seen. So if we just say let dojo of dojos, and then we can go like that, and then down here we want to close it out just with this guy.
That's like in Python saying for dojo and dojos.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so for each one of these ones, we want to create a new table row. We'll just do tr, ntr, and then up here we want to create the table data. And then I heard before, how do we want to input or output just one thing? Okay, so we'll do dojo dot location. Okay, close out that td, and then down here. Yeah, in fact, I'll just copy that down there. So instead of location, we want capacity here. Okay. So is this going to work yet?
No, you didn't have before.
I didn't.
No, he didn't. There's just no.
Yeah, right in there.
Oh,
But the reason I was asking that, so here's what we've got up on the render. This probably will work, right? Because we were already passing in the dojos that we were getting. I had forgotten that we had added this part already, but if we didn't, then of course we would have no. In fact, we'd probably run into an error because dojos does not exist at that point.
when you pass in dojos there, you have to do colon and then what you're going to call it.
Good question. We've come across this before. if the name of the property is identical to the variable name, no, we do not need the colon. If it were different, if I wanted to call it something else, if I wanted to call them, I don't know, all dojos, then I would do all dojos colon and then dojos. Okay, so we should be good to go on this. If I refresh the page, I'm actually getting my Burbank dojo. And so I should be able to add some other ones too if I want to add Seattle. I don't know how big it is. I'll just say it holds 100 people. All right, then there's Dallas, 50, and so on. One kind of gotcha to watch out for, and we're not going to like dive into this or anything, but what's important here in our form was that these names matched up with the keys in our schema. So if these were different, like for instance, if I put LOC instead of location here, and then I passed in the rec.body, well, we're going to have an issue now because we said in our schema that location is required, and instead I gave it LOC, so we're going to run into an error.
So
It's going to complain about it.
rec.body there, you could have just said location equals rec.body.location.
Yeah, exactly. So instead, if I wanted to change something around, I could just create a new object that I'm passing to my create method. So specifically down in here. Yeah, so instead of just passing in rec.body, I might create a new object that had the explicit properties that I wanted on it. And then there's one other quick way that I'll show you guys how to create a new instance of something. We could also do new dojo, pass in the rec.body, and then you could do a .save method on that. Okay, which as you can see also takes the same kind of callback in it. So it's going to take a callback that takes an error and a document in it.
That's just another way to do it.
So yeah, it's another way we can create a new instance of a dojo and then attempt to save that is sort of what this is doing. So.
Can we see the for each way really quick?
Oh yeah, that's right. I almost forgot about that. Let's just make sure that this still works. I think it's DC. Okay, so that still works if we do the new instance. And then let's touch on real quick the for each so you guys can see that. So back here in my template, I can use for each exactly like I do in JavaScript itself. So we'll say dojos dot for each, and then for each takes a callback, which is going to run against each instance or each element that's in our array. So our array has a bunch of dojos in it. So I'm going to say a function that takes in a dojo. And then I have to remember to close this function out down here. I need that closing, you see where that parenthesis is there? I need to close the for each down here at the bottom, is all. So now, each time I come across a new element, I can reference it by this name dojo because I called it the same thing in the argument. So we'll save that, refresh the page, same exact thing, so nothing changed. Any questions about the how the for each works?
So for each dojo, you make a table row with dojo.location.
I've already got people running for the door. Sorry I went on too long. But that's it though. We were just going to add some dojos to our database and show them on the page. We got that done, and you guys saw kind of some different ways of creating a new dojo, some different ways of looping through it. Good?
Good.
All right. No problem.